Good morning. Today we will be talking about westernization, and then we will also see one other topic called Jajamani system. Yeah, students were asking about the test syllabus. Kadu. Test syllabus anamata. Archaeology and fossils will do. Archaeology and fossils. Archaeology and fossils. I'll give you a cute list of 6 questions only, not big ones. I'll also avoid giving very long questions so that you feel comfortable writing. See, so much of comfort no teacher will give you. Small questions, and then on that I thought I would start with some small video. Ji sir, 1 minute. Boliye. No, I am not. Do you want me to? No, okay. I thought I'll focus more on these 2 only. Revising may be an issue, that's what. Anyways, in the upcoming days. That is the topic, multiple husbands.
It's called polyandry, one woman, several husbands. It's an unusual arrangement. Today, polyandry only persists in isolated villages in the Himalayas. When it was time for Sunita Kumari to wed, her family, like many in India, made arrangements. But they involved more than a dowry in the celebration. Sunita has not one husband, not 2 husbands, but 3, all brothers. What must her life be like? Westerners might find the practice shocking, but for this community it works fine. One reason, sheer practicality. In the Himalayas, arable land is scarce, farms are tiny. If each generation divided each family's holdings, everyone would starve. Polyandry preserves the farm and the family's future. Unlike most men in India, husbands here handle domestic duties. They're willing to help with the cooking and childcare. In fraternal polyandry, a family picks a wife for its oldest son. The marriage can also include his younger brothers. They don't have to join in, but most do.
No one takes a decision regarding one's own marriage. Everyone at home sits down together, and then it is decided with the consent of everyone.
Polyandry also functions as a form of birth control. No matter how many husbands she has, a wife can get pregnant only so often. If each man were to wed separately, the population here would explode. But what about sex, the forbidden core of the polyandry taboo? In truth, it's a matter of scheduling, and on the wife's part, forbearance.
Tolerance is very important. The wife has to understand everything. The older brother's nature, the younger brother's nature.
What about jealousy, that bane of even the most mundane marriage?
If the wife is smart, she will take turns each night and sleep with all the brothers. It's not like the older brother wants her the whole time.
Until recently, no one here much cared what the outside world thought. Isolation had preserved a way of life that had withered everywhere else. But a road now links the region to distant cities. And on roofs, once decorated only with prayer flags, satellite dishes sprout. this village has entered the modern world, whose images of romance stand in sharp contrast to polyandry. But polyandry here faces a bigger threat: education.
As more people are becoming more educated, we are also practicing family planning. If a father has only one son, there will be no question about the land. Therefore, common marriages will come to an end.
In 2, perhaps 3 generations, polyandry may vanish here. But for now, those who practice it find comfort in the familiar.
I myself feel that common marriage is very good. I feel like everyone should live like our family. Even if we do not have anything to eat or drink, we sit happily, we live peacefully.
Multiple husbands. What are the benefits of having the practice of polyandry? That is the summary of that documentary. What's the benefit of having multiple husbands? Tell me.
Division of labor.
Huh?
Division of labor.
She was giving a very plain answer, you are mistaking her. What else could be? Sharing of burden meaning what? Division of labor meaning what? Sharing of work meaning what? What kind of work you mean to say? So multiple earning things. So many channels from where she is getting so much of. Ji sir? More shopping. And what kind of societies you might have this kind of a system? Less agricultural land. The societies where there is less agricultural land, you are primarily an agrarian society. That's what is the problem there. You don't want land to be divided. So the entire family has to be together. If each one of you is getting married to one individually separate wife, different ladies, then it is bound to happen that land would be segmented. And this is that system where multiple husbands, all brothers can be married to one single lady and the land remains intact. Any other benefit? Any other benefit? Chappan, you are right, please tell me. Musiga navutu. One more benefit, land need not be divided and population control. You would see that in that interview, in that documentary. How many of her husbands are there? She cannot give birth for every husband during the same year. It's not possible. She would at the most be delivering one child per year. Unless otherwise it's a twins or something like that. It's a natural population control mechanism. And what else? What could be the benefits? For whom? Evvadu kuda asalu porapatna kuda kannetti choddu kada. Too many people safeguarding one single lady is Z category security actually. Kind of. Dekhiye, if things are done, we will try to watch this. Otherwise, I will put this in your Dropbox. Did you try studying the marriage payments? I had asked you to do that, marriage payments. A short note can be asked on this. And parallelly, I should ask you to do this. As such, I am loading you from now itself. Towards the end of the month when you are free, you can work on these topics. You can write down those topics. You can properly prepare a note on them. One will be, See, I actually want from you an answer to a question such as need of gender neutral legislations in India. Need of gender neutral legislations in India. So you try to see what all legislations, what is the meaning of gender neutrality actually. Is it that we are doing more benefit to one particular gender and the other one is getting neglected? Or meaning that is there an overtone of female centeredness in the legislations? Kind of a discussion. I must have made a mention of Ms. Bharadwaj in one of my earliest classes, and I asked you to watch that TED talk. Dekhiye, I mean, if at all this answer requires that video, you once again have to go back there. Second thing is, individually there are certain legislations on which you will have to work. One is evaluation of Domestic Violence Act, Protection from Domestic Violence Act. Evaluation of Protection from Domestic Violence Act. Somehow, you know, while writing these legislations, I have a very close soft corner for the male members. Somehow I can't stop supporting the male citizens, especially in such acts. And one more, Dowry Prohibition Act and recent amendments. Dowry Prohibition Act and recent amendments. What's your very personal opinion on this, dowry? Very personal opinion. We are there in the closed doors. I mean, you can feel free. Very personal opinion on dowry. ఒక పర్టికులర్ ట్యాగ్ ఉండి ఉంటుంది కదా, లేదా? हाँ, आप अपनी मर्जी से जो देना है दे दीजिए. We don't have a problem. Otherwise, we don't actually insist that you should be paying so much. I love it when a lady says this.
That opens up a lot of doors. Mercy say it will start like that, but at the end of the day, indirectly they might pressure you.
So initially आप जो मर्जी में आए दे दीजिए, बाद में slowly it will open doors for several other kinds of demands and eventually you'll succumb. This is one. And third is Hindu Inheritance Act. Hindu Inheritance Act, which has almost finished 20 years. 2005, यानी? Yeah, 15 years now. Hindu Inheritance Act. These are the acts that you will be preparing. So that will anyway help you in your general studies also. I'm sure you would be interested in doing that. We'll start with this particular topic, westernization. That is the book in which M.N. Srinivas, is the light okay? ठीक है ना? Social Change in India, that is the book in which Srinivas proposed for the first time the concept of westernization. See, the term was already existing. The term was already existing. He was using it to define a particular process in the discipline. So there are certain questions here that have to be kept in mind while you are writing or listening to this particular talk. Is it that people are trying these two routes one after the other in succession, that first we will try Sanskritization, then we will go for westernization? Or is it that you are parallelly trying both the routes? Who is actually choosing westernization, who is choosing Sanskritization? If at all we say that low caste, low varnas and the tribes outside the hierarchy of Hindu social order, if they are trying for Sanskritization, is it that the people down below or the people up out there are trying Westernization? What makes people try these kinds of things? So in the exam, generally the kind of questions is that how Sanskritization and Westernization operate in complementary way to each other. Somebody was asking me yesterday after the class that when people know that Sanskritic elements are anyway dying out, why is it that low caste still wants to try for Sanskritization? You will have to understand that we live in a very diverse geography. A preference in one region need not be a preference elsewhere. We have come to realize that caste is a reality. It is there all pervasively throughout the geography. But then to what extent you are considering caste important, that may vary from region to region. It's not simply which caste is the dominant caste, what is the hierarchy, that is the regional affair. But it is also that to what extent you are still retaining the significance of caste, that also is a regionally deciding thing. It's as simple as if you are in the urban region, you are mostly concentrating on the class kind of a thing rather than caste. That's a very generalized example that I'm giving. But then see, when Sanskritization concept had failed to address few of the issues, so critics have given a long list there. When they are saying that it is only Sanskritic groups are focused in this concept, non-Hindu or non-Indian variants are not considered. It was at that time Srinivas was trying to give this concept of Westernization, which is far different from the actual understanding of the term in general parlance. In general parlance, Westernization is seen as you try to imitate what is Western. Now the question is, who is Western? Who is Western may also be variable based on where you are located on the globe. When we are talking about the eastern part of the globe, even Africa is Western for us. The entire Europe may be Western, and then America could be Western. Which component you are actually calling? So the word Western more or less is fixed to somebody like, the English or maybe the British or maybe the American in the regular understanding today. That was also a time when Srinivas was writing on this concept, that was also a time when Christianity was seen as the result of Westernization. Christianity was seen as the result of Westernization. So I would want to start with that comment, and then I'll take you further with the definitions and all that stuff. Chalne de. Reflect on this sentence. Is Christianity the impact of Western? So when we say that it is a product of Westernization, what is the meaning of Western, or which group we are referring to? That's what has to be looked at. So is Christianity the result of Westernization? In general parlance, is Christianity the result of Westernization? Meaning somebody who is bringing it to us from the Western. There are people who looked at it from much earlier historical times. Christianity was actually the result of Easternization for the Western world. Christianity was the result of Easternization for the Western world, because when it is coming from Israel and other regions and going to the western part of the world, you can actually look at it from that animation that we have given, how religions are spreading. It must have started from Israel region, then went to the western part of the world, and then from where it was coming back. So it was not a true westernization, but maybe the eastern regions were giving this religion to the western part of the world, and from there we are borrowing. That is one way of looking at things. But there are a few who say that Christianity is not simply the result of the British rule. Because even earlier to the British rule, we already had tasted Christianity. Somebody during the life of Christ himself, or soon after the death of Christ itself, somebody had come and tried to speak about this particular religion on the eastern part. So even if we consider that to be true, that is also a westernization, because after all, geographical Israel is there on the western side. So whether it is the British or somebody else from the globe, whoever is introducing this religion to Indian subcontinent, this must have happened definitely through westernization alone. Keeping this thing aside, when Srinivas was defining westernization, he was doing it in a very narrow sphere. For him, westernization was the impact of the British rule alone. For him, westernization is the result of the British rule. And because of the British rule, what must have happened, what must have changed in India? He was actually referring to certain terms, that the changes brought in different levels due to the British rule of so and so years. So because we are looking at it from 2010, 15, 17, etc., we try to look at it from the perspective that maybe the definition is very narrow. But when he was writing in 1950s and 1960s, the major Western element that had influenced India was British alone. So he tried to give several examples. See, because of the British rule, whatever changes that have come up in the Indian society, I call it westernization. And the changes must have come in several of these things. Even if he is talking about technology, mostly he is referring to agrarian populations alone. And then there is one other stress that he gives is introduction of things like a printing press. And he was talking about technology in terms of communication, transport, etc. So on the technological front, limited areas were discussed by Srinivas as the ones that have started to have an impact on Indian society. In his descriptions, we see that the smallest element, such as introduction of a tractor, was a major technological change. I don't think you would be surprised at this stage, because we have already seen the kind of stone tools that were used by the primitive man. We were calling them technology using high sounding words for them. So a tractor by all means a high technology when compared to some kind of a stone tool. That was the beginning of neglecting or giving lesser importance to the kin groups. Because at that time what was prevailing in the agrarian society was balanced reciprocity or generalized reciprocity. In the generalized reciprocity in agrarian society, we found that the male members of all the households would try to help the neighbors and the same village dwellers in order to finish the agrarian work there. Maybe at the time of planting, at the time of harvest, people, the closest relatives would go and volunteer. That was based on either generalized reciprocity or balanced reciprocity. Now things were moving in the other direction. And it was not simply that, the transportation and communication kind of things that were also opening doors for people, long distance contacts, etc., etc. I do not want to deal a lot on those issues, but definitely small changes that were happening, small changes they were introducing were going to have a long time irreversible changes. When he was talking about institutions, he was categorizing institutions into two. The changes that British were trying to introduce in the existing institutions and the new institutions they were trying to bring in. He was writing extensively on this particular topic when he says that there are certain existing institutions. For example, in the educational institutions, he is looking at something like the Vedic schools. Apart from the continuation of the Vedic schools, that time had experienced a new secular education. So you can actually see there the kind of things that were being introduced by them were going to change the future of the entire subcontinent. You can try reflecting on it. You must have done this earlier also as a part of your exam preparation. What if we were not ruled by the British? What if we were not ruled by the British? What if we were not a feeder for a colonial economy? Maybe you can think on those lines, where we could have found ourselves if we were not ruled by them. But somehow this is a very interesting thing. I was trying to make a mention of this in one of our classes. That because this land was so fertile, the land was so rich, resourceful, we did not have many problems as the rest of the world was facing. See, for the person undergoing a particular problem, his problem is the biggest in the world. But when in comparison with the others, this was a very luxurious region, resources-wise, people-wise. See, at one point of time, propagation, numbers of people, that was also a symbol of prosperity. So we were a prosperous community. This is a very rarity in Indian history that I'm not teaching history as of now. I'm only trying to make certain remarks. It's a rarity that we waged wars on the others for having a control over land beyond these regions, beyond. So there were certain geographical boundaries that we were having. The very safe land that we had from the landlings, we were actually protected. It's not that everybody, whenever they wanted, they can take a sword and walk into our land and say that, yes, I have conquered you, kind of a thing. Very difficult thing. But then the kind of prosperity we were having that attracted people from long distances. For us, maybe that necessity was not there. That necessity was not there. And that was also maybe the reason why we were trying to be more philosophical. As Swami Vivekananda said that philosophy is not for the hungry stomach. Only those who are belly full can talk about philosophy. For the other people, it is the square meal that is much more than philosophy of God. So maybe we were so very, comfortable here. From the comfort zone, we started talking about various philosophical things. Maybe you can compare with what we are today with what we were at that point of time. Maybe the situations must have changed. Elsewhere, people are mostly talking about these philosophical things, and we are getting busy with the square meal. It explains that economics is the in thing of every aspect in culture. If you are economically fine, you have proper food sources, you can concentrate on things that are otherworldly, otherwise you are busy in these worldly things. People might differ with my opinion. This is one of the interesting things that I wanted to say to you. We are open for discussions on this. Coming here, when it comes to institutions, Srinivas was comparing Western education or the mainstream education schools versus the Vedic schools. Anybody whom you know of who have studied in the Vedic schools? Anybody in the farthest vicinity? On Nat Geo, there is one program called Big Kitchens. There is a program called Big Kitchens. One of the episodes there was about Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam. And in that episode, you see people getting trained in the Vedic school there and how they are actually getting accommodated in various jobs. There's so much of demand. God has a lot of demand there. I mean, He is in need of people who serve Him. So God there has systematized the whole process. There's a Vedic school from where you are getting the source. So in that there is a description of various segments of Vedic school, various varieties of Vedic schools that we have. Which temple encourages what kind of Vedic learning. So there's an intricate designing there. So not all Vedic schools teach the same syllabus. Simply put, not all gods are happy with the same kind of rituals. So if at all you have to be accommodated in one kind of a temple, your education has to be of that kind. But anyways, you can, when time permits, may look at the interesting remarks Raja Ram Mohan Roy had made on the Vedic learning, Vedic schools. There was at one place he was talking about what would be the fate of these people after 100 years of learning the Vedas. He was actually looking at the dysfunctional side of the Vedic literature, Vedic learning. Of course, people have criticized him, saying that he did not understand what actually is being taught in the Vedas, but then I'm not looking on that side. I was only looking at the comment that he had made. At a time when all others were talking about let us glorify our own Vedic learning. Generally, if somebody gives a statement that is against the status quo, there would definitely be critics. But that very person in the later part of the time would become a role model. Now, coming back here. When English education and the Western education was introduced, this provided a level playing field for all the castes. That was one of the primary reasons why Brahmins were not happy with them. If the caste kind of a hierarchy was extended to the Western education also, English education also, but definitely, sir, the Dvijas were the first ones to get into the English education, there's no doubt about it. But then it provided a level playing field to the people from different caste groups. It is not simply this kind of institutions. He was talking about the new institutions that British had established, like the modern army, modern administration. He was trying to compare the Gram Sabhas with the new kind of political institutions they were creating. Suddenly numbers become important, not your ritual purity. So interestingly, now numbers and ritual impurity become dominant elements in Indian politics. He also talks about certain other things such as new ideologies and values. This is here that I wanted to speak a bit. What could be the difference between the term westernization and modernization? See, when Srinivas is considering westernization, he is only looking at the British as the giver of westernization. People had criticized him. They said that, see, when British were ruling India, there were several other European fellows who were also having some kind of a rule, like the Dutch were there, or the French were there, or somebody else were there. You were not talking about those models. He was very clear. Like how when he was speaking about Sanskritization, he said that majority population is Hindu, so I am talking about it. But you can perhaps use the others also in Sanskritization as examples, as or models of Sanskritization. Similarly, he says, because majority of the country was ruled by these people and several changes were the result of this rule alone, I am using this term to define them. You can perhaps use the models in those respective regions. Like, if you take the western part of the country where the French were ruling, you can see the change, adaptation in the housing, adaptation in the language, in the dress style, etc., etc. That you can have the study limited to that particular region. This was anyway fine, but there were people who criticized Srinivas by saying that, see, you could not foresee the one major Western power that was going to emerge after 50 years, that was going to be North America. You understood the statement. The criticism was that Srinivas could not foresee the to be emerging power from the Western region, that was North America. I mean, they were talking about USA, that was to emerge in about 50 years of time as a superpower. You can actually look at the foolishness in the criticism. Srinivas was not a soothsayer. That he could predict somebody who was going to emerge after 50 years. And there were people who were criticizing this. Why alone the Western world, there were certain parts of the country that were influenced by Japanese, that were influenced by Russian. Russian influence was very much there. Poor old man, he was trying to write on certain things that Indian society was undergoing. If you are not happy that he did not consider the Russianization, maybe you can come up with a new concept to cover the Russian influence on Indian society. So many times what happens is, if we have decided that we will have to criticize somebody, we will definitely do it come what may. Most of us are very good at it. About our own selves, we don't get tired writing superlatives. But about somebody else, if we have to write a couple of praising words, it becomes very difficult. Very difficult actually. When was the last time you had wholeheartedly praised, complimented somebody? Not from your own gender. When was the last time that you had wholeheartedly complimented somebody for their work, for their personality, for their behavior? I am afraid. Maybe you will have to go into a couple of years into history where that must have happened. And when you are complimenting, the purpose of complimenting also has to be seen. Nothing for free actually. That's where I make it a point. One of the students was writing to me, ma'am, it's fine that you are appreciating, I wanted more critical remark from you. See, it's something like this. When you have submitted your very first script, I'll have to appreciate you for that gesture. In the first script itself, I would start to rip you apart. You would never come back. I remember my very personal experience in this regard. I don't want to name people. When I was preparing anthropology by myself, and then I had enrolled for some tests. That was my very first test. So I had gone there sitting with the teacher in his cabin. I had indicated the gender. So every page he was turning and he was asking me, is this the way you write? Is this the way you write? I really can't forget the humiliation. I can't forget the humiliation. And then he was saying, you shouldn't feel bad, this is not the way you write. You can understand, I was about 19 and a half at that time. I was writing a script of a subject which I haven't studied any time. And I see most of us are plus 25, plus 27, so I was about 8-10 years younger than what you are. So I told him, this is the reason why I'm here. And he didn't say anything. I just walked out. I paid 1,000 rupees to him. That was a big time money for me at that time, because I was selling biscuits and I was earning money at that time. So I didn't also ask him to pay back. But then I decided at that day, that time, that if at all I have to teach anything in UPSC, I'll have to teach anthropology. And it should be that he should send his students recommending for an admission. And that had to happen, that happened anyways. He forgot. You'll anyway forget, because you are the abuser, you will forget. But the one who was abused, he will never forget. And I understand from the psychology of the student that, when you are using some kind of negative words for the student, you actually should be able to take the responsibility on yourself, because they did not come here after studying this subject in the school or college. If your handwriting is bad, I can tell you something, because I did not teach you handwriting. You have already come here learning after having learned that. But I am introducing something new to you. You did not understand things positively, properly. It means that I have to share the responsibility of you not understanding. That is the reason why I don't try to give very harsh negative comments in your first test. But gradually, when you get used to listening to me, when you think that, okay, when you think that there are certain statements that this lady actually uses, we will have to accept them. Once that kind of a realization comes, then I can slowly be acidic towards you. And I remember one of the courses towards the end, just before the exam, the test will be there. Director sir was very unhappy. He was saying that you're not writing too many long comments out there. I was trying to explain to him, just before the exam, I don't want to discourage the student. Just before the exam, you should see to it that he goes in the high spirits. 20 things he must have written fine, and then 5 things he did not do well. You are not supposed to be very acidic towards him. Say that you are doing fine, this changes may be good. Because that is the time where confidence levels actually go down very fast, just before the exam. That is the reason why. So don't mind if I am not writing very long. If somebody from the ones who have already written the exam earlier, I can use any kind of abuses right from the first test. But you are writing the exam for the first time, then fine. So I was trying to respond to one of the mails that I have received. Sir, I was saying this. He was not a soothsayer. Srinivas was trying to see what were the major things that must have influenced. I asked you to watch this movie, Candle in the Dark. I don't know whether you have watched it so far. This is the one that portrayed the situation there. This is the one that gives how newer ideologies were actually being introduced. Everything Western is not right. Westernization is not a scientific imitation of people. In Westernization, you are actually having a new hierarchy that comes up. Just have a look at this. That is the new hierarchy that comes. British is a model of Sanskritization. British becomes a model of Sanskritization. And British takes the place of the Brahman. Vaishyas, the British take them hand in hand. Both of them are trading communities. We are looking at the basic purpose of their coming, trading community. So you'll have to be having good terms with the traders. Dono mil bant ke khayenge kind of a thing. So you'll have to have good terms with the traders. Kshatriyas, because eventually you'll have to dethrone them. Shudras, for the time being, are at the bottom, but with whatever developments, Shudras and the people out here, they would start making the upward route. British rule was a major challenge to the existing caste hierarchy. It was giving an opportunity for the lowest caste to progress. This the progressive fellows can take positively. The very traditional orthodox people may take it negatively. The criticism may be that we were all happy since hundreds and thousands of years, happily living in this subcontinent without any kind of a major friction. Things were very clear to us. The moment we are born, we knew what is our job. There was no confusion. People did not require a career counseling. Kya karna hai, kind of a thing. These days, that's a big problem. People knew their job the moment they are born. People knew whom to marry. People knew whom to share with. Everything was so crystal clear. The fellows came, disturbed the status quo. Though we have said in the previous class, disturbances, violence may be symbol of the positive that is going to occur. Not every violence is bad. Not every violence is bad. There's so much of meaning in that sentence. Not every violence is bad. There are certain violences in the family that are considered to be bad. Wife beating meaning what? Husband beating the wife. Wife beating meaning, it's not that wife is beating. Wife beating was considered to be bad. It is like, the superior fellow trying to subjugate the less powerful one or a weaker one to his whims and fancies. But suppose I substitute by this phrase, husband beating. It's an unusual thing. But it is trying to indicate that there is a new beginning that is going to come. Maybe a new kind of a status quo will get established later. It is not every time that the male is superior. Maybe by this we are going to establish the female rights society or mother rights society as we called in the first classes. So not every violence is bad. So a handful of landlords, when they were using the kind of violence against the low caste, this is an indication that the low caste is not tolerating what was happening all these generations. That's where I meant in this one. A new kind of a hierarchy. I am comparing this with a Sanskritization model. When I said that British is the new Sanskritization model, you will have to understand that in the Sanskritization model you are imitating, whether it is good or bad, you would want to imitate the one at the top and reach there. It is here that you will have to understand that whether Westernization is everything positive. You are aping what is Western, but you are not being rational there. Westernization is not along the rational lines. That's where the new concept came called modernization. In modernization, we see a scientific temper. You see questioning, you see rationality. Before imitating anything, you would see, before following anything, you would see whether that is suitable for you, necessary for you, or whether it will have a positive or negative impact on you. So when I'm saying that westernization is a mere blind imitation of Western, that might lead to negative tendencies also. It might give negative results also. So for example, I am imitating the food practices of the so-called Western. That might not suit your work nature, that might not suit your geography, that may be very costly if you are trying to imitate them from here. These days it has become a fancy to learn new dishes from the internet and things like that. Half the things that they mention are not found regularly. I have seen the ladies wasting their time looking for them. And then because they can't find here, there's an online business. You get all of them and then try to cook. You don't know actually how the dish has to taste. The moment you taste after making it, you feel horrible. Because you are not used to the half-cooked, half-baked kind of things, which they are into. For you, what is required is अच्छा सा मसाला लगे, उसमें अच्छा सा उसके अंदर जाए, and then you cook so much, you fry so much, use a lot of oil. Gallons and gallons of oil actually we use in our kitchens, without which we don't get the taste. So basically you will have to see your taste and what is the kind of difference that you have, availability matters and things like that. But when it comes to modernization, you actually have to test it before. You will have to question before you imitate. These are the topics that actually go close to the questions of diffusion. Why people accept, why people do not accept certain things. Many times because the powerful fellow is saying, you immediately accept it. That's where we said in one of the conditions, successful diffusion could be because of the who is the protagonist there. If you are looking at the protagonist and trying to imitate whatever he or the entity is propagating, then immediately you are into the trap. There was one very beautiful write-up. Why is it that the Amazonian forests are so fast depleting? Why is it that the Amazonian forests are so fast depleting? Why? Expanding agriculture. और बताइए. Then I will tell what the writer wanted to communicate. Changing weather patterns, agriculture, such as timber, etc. These are the kind of general remarks that we find. There's a particular case that the writer was communicating. The changing patterns of food habits of Chinese led to the Amazonian forest to deplete. The changing patterns of the Chinese in terms of food habits were responsible for the Amazonian forest. So it looks to be that he is overdoing in his writing, but then there's a definite indication there. Though it is a half-truth, there's a definite truth. See, a whole lot of population from China, when they were shifting from their traditional foods to, say, hamburgers, each burger requires particular amount of nutritious meat. And for that kind of nutritious meat to be produced, there is a particular kind of pulse or grain to be fed to the livestock. And when one additional hamburger has to be maintained, how much of additional that quantity of pulses and grain has to be produced? And what is the region that is best known for producing that kind of a ham meat? When all these things are actually worked out for increasing numbers of thousands and lakhs of the hamburgers that are in demand now in the new China, you have to actually cut down so much of a land and convert this Amazonian region into the pulse and other grain producing region, not to feed the people, it is actually to feed the livestock. From them you are taking the feed. We are actually talking about one single change that is occurring in the food habit, conversion from a traditional food to the hamburger. He was actually very beautifully giving all those statistics. One hamburger, how much of food, and what is the land that is required, and where from, what is the available land, where from you will have to get the new land, kind of a thing. This can be seen as a blind westernization. You may say that China per se may not be losing. It is anyway Amazonian region that is losing. What for us? But ultimately the impact would definitely be there. Srinivas was writing at certain other places how the Brahmanical ways of life also have changed because of westernization. It is not simply the lower caste that were changing. Brahmins themselves were changing. A full-length essay he writes on this, changing status of Brahmin, changing lifestyle and status of Brahmin. He tries to bring very mundane examples there, like what you eat has changed. Being a Brahmin, what you eat has changed, how you eat has changed. So he was narrating the time when you used to sit on the floor and then you used to consume the food in a particular ritual way. Food consumption is a highly ritual activity, especially in India, more so for the Brahmin caste. Preparation of food and then consumption of food is a highly ritual activity. But when things started to change, your occupation has changed. You are no more a full-time purohit. You are no more a full-time purohit. You have other jobs to catch up. You don't have so much of time to indulge in such a religious cooking activity. And hence you are getting used to faster ways of doing. Maybe instead of sitting down and standing up, that's a very laborious thing. Now you started to eat on the dining table. And you got used to newer contents to cook with. So more and more people started to consume things like potatoes, which were actually the things that were growing underground were not permitted for the Brahmin. They were not considered to be the purer versions which are growing under the ground. So carrots and kinds of things. Now because the medicine also started to propagate all these kinds of things, in the interest of the health and in the interest of the faster preparations, their food nature has actually changed. And it is not simply that when you are in the luncheon, when you are in the canteen of your offices, you cannot say that I would want to have a ritually purer space to sit and eat, kind of a thing. Not possible, and hence. He was narrating one instance. There was a time when whatever may be the distance, either you travel by foot being a Brahmin, or maybe you would go in the buggy, kind of a thing, but the buggy has to be purified before it takes you, picks you up. Later, when he started giving services to several families because he needs money now, he thought that maybe I would get a bicycle. But the problem with the bicycle was the seat that is made of the leather. You're not supposed to touch the leather. But not all leathers are forbidden. Not all leathers are forbidden. You can sit on the skin of a deer in worshipping. If you are a Shaivite, maybe perhaps you can sit on the tiger skin also. And if you are a Kshatriya, you can wear tiger nail, Puligoru. Down south, Puligoru is very popular. Puli is tiger, Goru is nail. Puligoru. Not one, but people have two also sometimes. It signifies something which I don't want to talk about. But currently it is considered to be a wildlife offense. You are not supposed to sport. Yester generations people used to sport. Now, there was a time when they started to use the bicycle, the problem was leather, so they used to cover it with some kind of a neutral clothing and sit on it. Initially, people were using the skin of the deer. The Brahmin was using the skin of the deer. But it might so happen that it must have got stolen. He's actually putting there, somebody stolen. Now you can't remove the seat and travel on that. So slowly, idhar udhar dekha ke baith gaya, chalo chalte hain, kind of a thing. Slowly you got used to traveling on this kind of a thing. Transportation and communication, it had done the necessary damage. There are no bogies reserved for the upper caste kind of. You will have to share things with the others. So travel, communication, links, they have actually changed the whole thing. Food has seen a major change. These actually have long time impacts. You may say that these are very insignificant day-to-day things, but when the day-to-day insignificant things are changing, this would ultimately bring a change in the overall lifestyle of the people. The kind of barriers that were there on the caste lines, they were anyway to disappear. But see, for people like Ram Mohan Roy, the British impact had definitely done so much of good. Because these are the people who were trying to challenge the age-old institutions and practices such as sati. And they were the people who were trying to pressurize the government to come up with legislations. Though the government was not ready to intervene in the local cultural aspects, our own people were there who were trying to pressurize the government to bring such kind of legislations. So in a way we can look at it from the kind of positive impact, a long time positive impact the British must have done too. These were the kind of things that he was trying to explain. His major focus was on bringing a new social order, a new social hierarchy. Because all these years people were thinking that Brahman was the supreme and the kind of order was static. But he was saying that it is not always that way. Occasionally it can be Vaishya that is at the top and certain other castes. So this is the new kind of social order. When Vaishya becomes the number one, it means that the producer, the one who deals with the economics, the one who deals with the business and banking, when he is becoming number one in the hierarchy, money becomes the deciding factor. That was the summary that he was trying to bring. So Sanskritization was giving a higher position to the ritual elements. Westernization was giving an importance to the economic and secular elements. Now, when people were trying to get Sanskritized, this was not an ensured route. The result is not assured. You are trying, you may get rejected, you may fall much below. And it is also seen that by the time you are going there, he is not there. You thought that maybe I will bring him down. He is opting certain other way, and he is trying to go in the Western mode. So looking at this, lower castes are getting this awareness that even if I am trying, there is no assurance. Even if I am going there, I should go somewhere else. So it's like, you are going for medicine and engineering and people are anyway going for IAS. Why I should do that? I will take my BA and go there. As simple as it is. If your ultimate goal is westernization, why should you unnecessarily try a path that is not really sure? And that's how things are. And I'm bringing the discussion back to those two terms. Exogenous and endogenous processes of social change. So initially people thought that when he's explaining all this, Sanskritization is largely an internal phenomena, internal to Hindu, internal to Indian subcontinent. But then we see that Sanskritization was facilitated by Westernization. Sanskritization was facilitated by Westernization. It's as simple as Westernization was giving an opportunity for new kinds of jobs. It was giving an opportunity for new kinds of education, secular education. When secular education is open for you, you can actually change the book that you are reading. You can make it a religious book. This was one big problem with Hinduism. We were trying to control the knowledge. The upper castes were trying to control the knowledge. We were making all precautions that a larger community is ignorant of what is actually written in the books. That is where the British have changed the situation. When they started printing religious books in every local language, every regional language, religion was in the hands of every person, irrespective of the social strata. And this had given a confidence to people, especially to the lower castes, that see, God is not reserved for the upper castes. If God was a God for everybody, he has to be accessible to everybody. And that kind of a confidence was given by the British when they were writing their own scripture in different languages, number one. Secondly, this had also given an opportunity for people within Hinduism to think that, okay, the religious scripture can be translated into several other local languages. When an English-based or a Roman-based or certain other language-based scripture is actually getting translated into our languages, within our own region also we can try this. Several Englishmen also helped this. Those facts are known to you. Some people were there who were translating Upanishads, some were translating Vedas, etc. So now the Hindu religious scriptures were available in the local variants. This is also something, in a way, westernization was facilitating Sanskritization. So you could understand, why is it that in the first place I should accept a Brahmin as the superior fellow? Or why is it that I should be imitating him alone? Kind of questions were much open to the people from the lower castes. So the first generation people who were trying to study the scripture, they tried to take the maximum benefit. First generation from the lower caste who were studying the scriptures were trying to take the maximum benefit. They tried everything possible to make a claim. Yesterday our friend was asking that how is a claim made? When you are imitating in the process of Sanskritization, how is it that you make a claim? You would announce to the rest of the world that, see, I want to be this kind of. On several occasions, this is a very quiet, very silent claim that you are making. A very silent claim that you make. It's as simple as your chess game. The silent kind of a war that you are indulging in. So once you are getting education, once you are using a reservation, or once you are getting one type of a job, you are getting land grants, when all this is happening, people notice you, not that you go unnoticed. The change that is occurring in you is not going unnoticed. People are noticing. They understand that your power is getting built. And the time comes when people will make a road when you are trying to pass away. They would give you space to pass. Sometimes it is unbelievable to you alone. Nu Devudu ayyavante neeke teliyadu Devudu ayyavani. Pakkodu chepte gaani teliyaledu Devudu ayyavani. And suddenly you will understand that you became a god. So change that is occurring in you at a societal level doesn't go unnoticed. And I was telling him yesterday that sometimes the claim is vocal also. Earliest census documents were a mechanism of putting across your claim. Earliest census documents were a mechanism of putting up your claim. That, I belong to such and such caste. That was possible because earliest census documents were registering the caste as well. For a long time we did not do that. And once again now we are trying to do the caste-based census. And then in the earliest times in the sense when transportation and kind of things were introduced, it was possible for people to shift their location and make a claim, which may not be true. But in the contemporary times when so much of awareness is there, it is not really possible for people to make such kind of claims because there's so much of literature that is existing. This sounds to be an interesting one. Sanskritization and westernization go hand in hand. At one point of time, Sanskritization seems to have failed. Maybe people have chosen westernization. Is it that Sanskritization, once you have given it up, then you are going for westernization? It may not be so. You still give value to ritual purity. You might be using the benefits of westernization to make your name in Sanskritization also. So the ritual element in the heart of Indian subcontinent has still not vanished completely. As long as you give importance to ritualism, you still find Sanskritization useful. In simple words, as long as caste exists, Sanskritization has to exist. Hanji sir.
If British has given the model of Sanskritization,
Yes.
then it is bound to occur that the ritual aspect has to go down.
That is what I am saying. As long as the caste element is there, definitely British had established themselves as a model, and hence for some people for whom British way of life was immediately accessible, that was possible. Meaning that the upper caste, if I am saying, they were accessible to the British. I mean, British were accessible to them, and hence the way of life could easily be shifted. So you could see that the upper caste, the landlord families trying to imitate the British ways of life. Morning चाय तो पहले होती नहीं थी, अभी चाय का बहुत बड़ा business होता है. And the kind of lifestyle they were into. But then it is not that ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई remote है कि उस पर click कर दिया. And then immediately the other kind of ritual elements are vanishing and you are having only the British element.
For example, the low caste, it tries to imitate the Western frame of reference like the Britishers. They might do their value system, their ideologies, which is not be ritualistic in nature. So basically the Sanskritic elements, they are need not be ritualistic. Yes, the upper caste, they try to imitate the Western model, no doubt. But if the lower caste directly imitates the Western model of Sanskritization, then actually the ritual aspect may not be present.
But not everybody would do that. As you are saying here, the lower caste, if they are imitating the Western, the ritual element may not be there. But not everybody would choose that, because in the heart of the hearts, this Brahmanical supremacy, or the caste element, when that is ingrained in our lives, you would at some point of time would want to choose Sanskritization, which is still a reality. There are several Smith communities who are still trying to establish that they are the dominant caste kind of a thing. So you can say that Brahmin or Western became one of the models in the process of social change. So this is one process of social change, that is another process of social change. Which one you choose is more conditioned. It is decided by the kind of situations that you are into, or what exactly you would want to be after some generations. So it's like, when I'm saying westernization, this provided one additional opportunity of social mobility. In many of the writings on caste mobility, this element is absent, but you can add that also. You can say that Western could be one of the models of caste mobility. So change may be along with rituals, may not be along with rituals. When you say this, when you have chosen westernization, there is nothing like a ritual element they are adopting. But you are forgetting there that when they are choosing Western model, they are giving up the rituals they will have to perform for the other castes. So others are actually losing a long time labor force. That is the reason why people get into doing all kinds of daily chores for themselves. So it's like when you are in the urban area, you don't mind cleaning your own toilet. But if you go to your native place, you wouldn't try to do that. You would want the scavenger alone to come and do it for you. Here you are your own scavenger. Or you don't mind cleaning the others' toilets also. Okay. Ji sir.
Is there a process where from the lower caste to adopting the westernization,
And once they get the status, social status, they try to get back to the stage of their
they can influence that way. They can influence that way because the Western benefits are already there with you. It is easy for you to, there is a possibility. So because ultimately maybe your idea is Sanskritization, I am choosing Westernization as a route to Sanskritization. There can be a possibility. I remember one of our students, for him Vedic learning was the in thing. He belonged to scheduled caste community. He was rejected. But then once he goes through all this process and then he was studying all the scriptures, he applied with the fake identity, etc. He got into the school, Vedic school. And of course, at one point of time, people found that this was a fraud and they have rejected his admission and kinds of things. But then there is a possibility. You get all the kinds of awareness there is. But to what extent with your own caste name, whether you are able to get in there? So, when such kind of established orthodox systems are there, you cannot play with them with such an openness. That is the reason why a Smith might want to call him a Vishwakarma Brahmin, because the name matters. Hanji sir.
There is no ritual purity. So they are going for Christianity for ritual purposes.
Go ahead.
They are not allowed to get into the temple.
Okay.
If I am in Hindu temple.
Okay.
If I convert to a Christian, I can get closer to the God.
Okay.
I can get spiritual knowledge.
Okay.
Is that Sanskritization or Westernization?
Christianization.
What type of Sanskrit?
Christianization.
No, ma'am.
No, I am very clear when you are asking me this question. When you are giving the example of Christianity, LP Vidyarthi uses this word Christianization.
To get the ritual purity, few people are going for ritual to get spirituality and ritual purity, which they are not getting in Brahmanism or Hinduism. So what we can do? Westernization, Sanskritization, Christianization. Which one is better?
See, converting to the other faiths may be for different reasons. Converting to the other faiths may be for different reasons. I use this very example. I take this one of Christianity alone. The sources for Christianity can be of different kinds. One may be from the tribe. Those are the three general variants. Your question lies here. Low caste or untouchable, whatever. I mean, for your satisfaction, untouchable also. See, you'll have to understand that not all these conversions are faith conversions. They're not faith conversion. Not all of them are faith conversion. Faith conversion may be a characteristic here. If a high caste is changing their faith, when I'm using a word high caste itself, your position is relatively high. You need not have to complain anything. You are given everything due to you. But you are not satisfied. You are looking for something else. Something much higher than the highest thing that is given to you. That could be the place where a faith conversion might come. When it comes to tribe, that may be a mechanism of, that may be the result of several things. A missionary might be working there. The missionary work that is witnessed by the tribe must have changed their outlook. Or instead of the missionary, you may say that demeaning of their cultural practices, looking down upon the cultural practices, could be one of the reasons for choosing the other faith. One is that I serve you. I serve you so well that you ask me, if you are serving this way, who is your God? If the follower himself is like this, what could be the God himself? So it's an indicator that that's how the missionaries are actually trained. Your work should speak. Your work should speak your faith. That is one way of attracting people. The other way could be that you look down upon the cultural practices. You create inferiority among the people and say that, see, our religion is superior. You adopt it. This is one other way of doing it. When I am coming here, their expectation is actually to get out of the atrocities, to get out of the lower position, to get out of the ill treatment. There could be several ways of getting out of the ill treatment. Somebody had adopted Buddhism, somebody else had done that, somebody else has done this. I have chosen this. That might be a mere accident. That might be a mere accident. Or it may be an informed choice. That may be an informed choice. So in this particular thing, what is happening is the primary intention is I would want to get out of it. When you say that his conversion there may be because he would want to go close to the God kind of thing, that may be one of the things. Primarily that you have certain disadvantages. You would want to come out of those disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is I can't touch my God. I can't even enter the premises. Thankfully, most of the temples are now open for everybody, except a few where based on your gotra, based on your caste identity you are. But then most of the temples are now open to everybody, irrespective of the caste, irrespective of the religion also. And that is the reason why Hinduism has a large following. They don't bar any non-Hindu from entering the premises. That is one attraction Hinduism gives. And here, maybe that being from a lower caste, I can touch my God. But then this one, we call it Christianization only. Anything else?
If you relate this to the current aspect now, we find that so many dominant castes and communities are fighting for their representation. Like they have Jats and Marathas in Maharashtra and Lingayats in Karnataka. Once upon a time they were very dominant and even dominant now. So can we say because the lower groups are trying for their representation and they have considerable representation now, they are questioning their relevance and their status?
It's like trying to going back to their own past, kind of. Definitely in the contemporary times, one, number matters. Numbers do matter. And then whatever the legislative positions are, whatever the comforts that are provided, the concessions that are given, the provisions created for the so-called the lower castes, that becomes an eyesore for the dominant fellows. So you might be economically dominant, you might be having the kind of social dominance, but you try to claim it based on certain disadvantages that you in the yesteryears had possessed. So you try to go back. It is something like a word that I have used some time back called retribalization, if you could recall. Retribalization. At one point of time, I didn't want a tribal identity. I got into Hindu hierarchy. Now I find the tribals there are better off, so I want to go back, kind of a thing. Can I go? We will make a small note on westernization. Modernization, you'll study from the... Write down, sir. The concept of westernization, was introduced by, concept of westernization was introduced by M.N. Srinivas in response to the criticism against in response to the criticism against the concept of Sanskritization. The concept of Sanskritization. In the book Social Change in India, he defined Westernization. He defined Westernization as, right in quotes, the changes brought about in Indian society and culture, as a result of over 150 years of British rule, 150 years of British rule, with the term incorporating changes occurring at different levels such as technology, institutions, ideology, and values. Write in points there. Firstly, with regard to technology, Srinivas presented the technologies introduced in agriculture, industrialization, and transportation. This had led to the emergence of new classes along with the existing caste system. Within agriculture, the British introduced plantation agriculture, and mechanized farming. They, according to Srinivas, had dual influence on village India. For example, plantation agriculture helped the land-owning Vaishyas to emerge as a class above Brahmins, and just below the British. It has created a new hierarchy of varnas, with the British as a reference group. Right in the next paragraph. Srinivas' study in Mysore. Srinivas' study in Mysore referred to the Brahmins who divided themselves into Vedikas and Laukikas. Vedikas and Laukikas. Laukikas are those who shifted to secular jobs, along with changing dress patterns, using new means of communication and transport, resulting in reducing caste distance. This in a way strengthened Sanskritization. That is, the proximity between Brahmanical and other castes gave a confidence to the low castes that the gap can be reduced. According to Robert Lancer, though westernization was seen to have propagated nationalism, it was accompanied by a revival of casteism, linguism, and regional consciousness. In this sense, Westernization exhibited both positive and negative influences. Secondly, in terms of institutions, Srinivas examined the British influence on the existing institutions, and their role in creating new institutions, such as a modern army, అదేంటది కంచె కంచె చూసారా అట్లా మోడర్న్ ఆర్మీ సివిల్ సర్వీస్ new educational institutions oriented towards emergence of a middle class. The new educational institutions delivered secular education open to all castes, unlike the traditional education. This led to temple entry movements and assertion of rights by backward castes in the later times. According to O'Malley, that is the name of the thinker there, O'Malley. According to O'Malley, the institutions in the context of westernization can be studied under the titles of legal institutions, social institutions, and political institutions. According to him, westernization led to discussions such as stress on equality and consciousness of injustice. Practices such as sati, untouchability, child marriage came to be questioned. Right in the next slide. Among the social institutions, institution of marriage, endogamy, dowry, found new interpretations and questions. Srinivas provided reference of certain Brahmin groups in Mysore where Western educated Brahmin boys shifted to dowry shifted to dowry from bride price. It is here that westernization was seen as a blind imitation of anything Western, a blind imitation of anything Western without rationality. With regard to political institutions, the British introduced ideology of democracy, giving importance to numbers. A study of Rampura village brought out untouchables getting Sanskritized with the help of westernization, which includes Western education, new jobs, in addition to the newfound democracy. In this context, Srinivas brings together Sanskritization and westernization. It can be established that the elements of Sanskritization and dominant caste such as numerical supremacy, Western education, jobs in administration are directly linked to westernization. Right in the next one. With regard to ideologies and values, Srinivas opined that humanitarianism and equality were the basis of westernization. You can recall all that was written by several congressmen of that time, that they considered British as the symbol of humanitarianism. A British cannot err, cannot be anti-human kind of things. And maybe that was also the reason why they didn't want them to leave so early. Suddenly when things were announced that they were leaving, people were not really happy and very much disturbed, including the first Prime Minister. I didn't say anything. You can write it. Humanitarianism was reflective in, నన్ను తప్పుగా అర్థం చేసుకోవద్దు. I'm a plain teacher. I didn't say anything. You shouldn't read in between my lines. Humanitarianism was reflective in Christianity and the missionary work This is when Christianity is considered to be the given of westernization. Srinivas in his discussions also brought out the darker side of the missionary zeal to conversions. The darker side of missionary zeal to conversions. There is one word, I want you to know this. What is that? What could that mean? Industrial nomadism. You can take that in your footnote as we talk about it. Mobility of people to work. और बताइए. So you are eager to establish many more industries and hence you are running from place to place. In search of avenues to invest, you are moving from place to place. So generally we understand this word in a common parlance that maybe there are some people going from place to place establishing industries or working in industries or looking for investments. So this is that word used by LP Vidyarthi. Industrial nomadism is a word that is used by LP Vidyarthi from the perspective of a result of industrialization in the new areas. Result of industrialization in the tribal areas. I'll put it this way. This you are writing in your footnote, not as a part of what you are writing now. Like how westernization was a misnomer or differently understood when Srinivas was defining, this term also has its own contextual meaning. When he said industrial nomadism, what he meant was the kind of ill treatment meted out to the tribal people. The kind of ill treatment meted out to the tribal people because of the young men from the mainstream, because, I repeat my sentence, the kind of ill treatment meted out to the tribals because of the young men migrating for jobs in the industries. Because of the mainstream young man migrating in search of jobs. So it's something like this. New industries were established in the tribal areas. People from the mainstream, the young fellows from the mainstream are actually migrating to these regions to work there. When they are migrating, they are not coming simply to work. Once they came into the tribal areas, they were demeaning the lifestyle of the tribals, behaving disrespectfully to them, and L.P. Vidyarthi mentions specifically with the tribal women. So this is the kind of ill treatment that is meted out to the tribals because of the migrating young men from the mainstream to the tribal areas. This whole process of bringing the kind of discontent among the tribals, they were not really unhappy with industrialization. Their unhappiness was with the kind of treatment the industrialized people were giving to them. So it is not simply laughing at the cultural practices, it is actually the kind of disrespectful behavior they were showing towards the tribal women. This is the whole thing. That is industrial nomadism. Dur tak, it doesn't communicate this meaning when you're looking at this word. So he was trying to explain the result of people migrating, establishing industries, and in that expansion process, whatever is happening to the tribal world is industrial nomadism. Are you okay in the class? Are you fine in the class?
So how is nomadism related to what you just said?
Nomad, you understand? You go from place to place. For studying UPSC, you go from place to place. You are UPSC nomad. They are industrial nomad.
But there is a negative connotation there, like
Yes.
come out. That is not nowhere. These two words are nowhere related to the definition that you gave.
It is not, I don't call it definition. Actually, he is trying to explain the process from the perspective of results that are happening because of this event. I don't call it a definition. Like how even in the westernization, we thought that everything an imitation of Western. But who Western is, he is defining. So there is a contextual meaning. This was the word he was using especially in the context of Rajmahal region, Jharkhand Rajmahal region, where the tribals, those were the first tribals to get exposed to the large amount of industrialization and other things. So the kind of treatment that was meted out to the people there from the people who are finding inroads into that region for the jobs, for the exploitation, etc., etc. So different kinds of exploitations he is addressing, including the kind of human trafficking. Keep writing, sir. Westernization brought changes. Westernization brought changes in the food habits, consumption patterns, use of metals, use of new metals in the daily life. Among several castes, Brahmins experienced highest change in the daily life due to westernization. Continue writing there. Srinivas referred to the secular influences of westernization. Underline the word secular influences. Secular influences of westernization. Unlike Sanskritization, westernization influenced Islamic, tribal, and other groups such as Parsis. A few well-read Muslims a few well-read Muslims led movements of westernization to bring up the backward Muslims, Keep writing in bullet points. Among the Khonds, Khonds, among the Khonds in central India, westernization created high castes. Westernization created high castes who emerged competitors to the local dominant castes, such as the Thakurs. In the study of castes of UP, Harold Gould, we used this name in yesterday's class, Harold. Harold Gould referred to westernization facilitating change in occupation and land grants from the British bringing new competitors to the existing traditional land owning communities. Bernard Cohn studied the social status of the lower castes, such as the Chamars and Nai, due to migration and Western education. According to him, migration to urban areas changed the identity of such castes. It's as simple as it is, sir. You can recall the Nai in your rural setup. Either he is doing the haircuts under the tree, or maybe a small time place, a shed, where he is trying to do this task with a very old dilapidated shaving kit that he has. Maybe that once in a while he would go to the upper caste homes to give his services. This is the rural setup. But when it comes to the urban areas, this work of Nai is in a big demand. It is not simply the traditional Nai, but the upper caste would also want to take up the job. The name changes. You are not called the Nai, but you may be called a beautician, a hairdresser, or maybe whatever kinds of names. So there he didn't have a board also. But maybe in the middle towns, there may be board like, haircutters kind of a thing. But when it comes to the very urban center, you have different nomenclatures where even a Brahmin fellow or a Kshatriya fellow wouldn't mind cutting the hair of the low caste. Or just imagine an upper caste fellow trying to give a massage to the lower caste fellow. So where has the caste gone? Where is the touch untouchable? So it's like the currency can play anything. But then maybe back home, when the naive family visits their own place, he may take the old time haircutting thing and then go to the same landlord's houses, give the similar kind of a ritual service. But ultimately his status in the urban area is that of an envious thing for the landlord community there. That is what Kohn means by urbanization, migration to the urban areas, giving new opportunities. This is actually something very scintillating, to think that the erstwhile purer community is trying to pick up an occupation that is highly impure, but because it gives the respectable position. So what is giving respect to you in today's times in the society is very much different from what was happening earlier. The traditional Purohit may not be getting so much of that kind of a mileage, which, क्या नाम है? क्या नाम है? हाँ? जावेद हबीब, हाँ, जावेद हबीब, हाँ, actually gets. So looking at the hairstyle, I also actually am constantly on a lookout. This batch I did not find many interesting hairstyles, especially from the boys. But I will be looking for the interesting hairstyle so that my little fellow can have. No? Kind of. Right now. Bernard Kohn agrees with M.N. Srinivas that Sanskritization and Westernization are parallel processes which are complementary to each other. In some cases, the lower caste definitely might choose Westernization instead of Sanskritization, because the latter has no assured result. In addition, Westernization provided a new goal and a way forward for the dominant caste. meaning that it is giving a new purpose to the one that is there. Because even if you are the topmost in the society, after some time you get disillusioned, what life kind of things, where to go. So westernization gives a model. Pilla jamindaru paina anta baane undi emundi. You have nothing to achieve in life, everything is there. So a new kind of an objective can be set. So that's how it is. A new problem anytime creates a new opportunity. Keep writing. Limitations of the concept of westernization. Limitations of the concept of westernization. According to Robert Lancer, write in the brackets, based on the studies of Middle Eastern societies, bracket close, concept of westernization as given by Srinivas has a narrow scope. It did not incorporate the Russian, Turkish, Japanese, and the West Asian influence on several Indian segments. He presented the models like the Arab model, the Chinese model of social change. Secondly, Srinivas was criticized for failing to foresee the influence of emerging powers, such as the USA, Australia, and New Zealand. Thirdly, the ideology of westernization does not incorporate rationality. This had necessitated social anthropologists to depend on the concept of modernization. To sum up, Sanskritization and westernization have been two ways of social progress which occasionally intersected with each other and strengthening each other. Full stop. Srinivas disagrees that westernization begins with the end or failure of Sanskritization. The end or failure of Sanskritization. Both have their own relevance based on the cultural and temporal setting. Stop. जी मैम. Pure. Concept of pure. Whether you mean in general the concept of purity, impurity, or caste in particular. That is one. See, there is one examination where this concept was taken up, where caste in the other regions of the world and other religions also. When I am saying caste in other religions, I am actually talking about something like purity and impurity. In Indian context, in the Hindu context, the concept of purity and impurity is considered to be the basis of caste. Because when we say that caste-based occupation becomes, so if I am eliminating the thought of purity and impurity, there is no caste. In the Hindu case, if I am eliminating the concept of pure and impure, eliminating this, there is almost an insignificant presence of caste. See, elsewhere if we observe, wherever there is the discrimination based on something that is sacred which I am having an access to, certain others do not have. In various grades you see the presence of purity, impurity. In other words, if at all certain communities are there, Jewish groups are there, where priesthood has to do with certain groups alone. Purity, the priesthood is restricted to certain families, certain lineages alone. Not everybody can be a priest. Meaning that you are restricting the access to a purest occupation to some people alone. So I say that even in the non-Hindu communities of this kind, there is a presence of purity and impurity. So it may not be in the same kind of volume and intensity, but wherever there is a gradation based on to what extent I can have an access to something that is called pure, something that is called sacred, then this element will be existing. There was one question mailed to me. I thought you will answer that. I should not be answering. The question was, what is the need of the class notes? Question was, what is the need of the class notes? And then supplementary questions are also there, such as, to what extent I can rely on the class notes? अब ये तो I don't want to answer. एग्ज़ाम लिख लो फिर पता चलेगा. You can do an experiment by writing the notes based on the class notes then you can have your own case. You'll either agree with this or disagree with this. If you think that class notes cannot be reliable based on the marks that you have got, you can try something else. That's what I can tell you. I didn't know how to beat my chest and say that no, my class notes is reliable. But ठीक है, I due respects with the questioner. I have realized after years of experience that not all questions need to be answered. All questions need not have answers also. So that is the topic that we are starting, called Jajmani system. Many practices seem to be the characteristics of the age-old traditional Indian society, but they find a mention in our syllabus and in the question papers. So for such kind of questions, we will have to understand contemporary relevance. I thought that these are the basic things a village community of India has. That's from a textbook, so I think I was lazy to prepare a flow chart there. Self-sufficiency, solidarity, Jajmani, factionalism may not be there in all the villages, hierarchical settlement pattern, religion and related things, and then very clearly established caste system. So caste, self-sufficiency, solidarity, Jajmani, factionalism, hierarchy of settlement patterns, religion that exhibits itself in the form of temples and festivals. Festivals are necessary so that religion survives. So functional study of festivals is that festivals are necessary so that religion survives. But of course, with time, the reason why we observe religious festivals, it changes. We need some kind of celebration. We need some kind of get-togethers. And we want certain kinds of preparations to be cooked. And hence. It's as simple as the laddus of Ganapati are not a regular affair. You make only on that occasion. It's very nice actually. All our festivals, they have the list of preparations. You get to eat a variety when you are celebrating. So I repeat what I was saying. Various basic dimensions of Indian village community: self-sufficiency, village solidarity, caste system, religion, factionalism, hierarchy of settlements, Jajmani system. We are trying to work out on that. It is in a way to explain that caste system is ingrained in every smaller cultural practice that you take up in the village level. I'll try to brief it to you in as quick and as simple terms as possible. One of the earliest descriptions of Jajmani system was by Dr. D.N. Majumdar. I want you to take down these definitions before I show that picture. Wiser. Jajmani system is an interfamilial system with intercaste relations. Interfamilial, intercaste relations. This is an extension of that. It is patterned on superordinate and subordinate relations between patrons and suppliers of services. That was the earlier definition, this was the later one. And we later find that there is nothing like superordinate and subordinate. It is a relation between patrons and suppliers of service. We'll see how. There are several individual concepts here to deal with in this chapter. After Jajmani, we will be going to sacred complex and then nature man spirit complex. Once I do that, I would quickly take you to impact of different religions on Indian society. But when I do that impact of different religions on Indian society, I would want to give a basic idea from chapter 5 of paper 1. What is religion? What are the approaches of anthropology towards religion? Can I? The first definition says it is interfamilial, intercaste relations. The later one says that there is an arrangement between the provider of services and the one who gets the services. Just have a look at this picture. That was given by Dr. D.N. Majumdar in that particular work of him, Caste and Communication in an Indian Village, 1962. He was describing the Nam Samskaran ceremony of the daughter of the land-owning caste, land-owning family. So if it is a celebration in the landlord's house, every caste has to participate. There are so many caste groups that serve the land-owning community. There is a goldsmith, there is a chamar, there is a dhobi, there is a lohar, there is a brahmin. Interestingly, Brahmin is equal to all others there. It's only that his occupation is slightly purer. To give importance to his occupation, I have written him first, as if that looks to be top, but it is not the top. Finish writing, then I'll talk. I didn't make this picture. This is an understanding from his essay. Landowning caste is at the center, receiving services from everybody. A Brahmin, a lohar, a sonar, a carpenter, a mali, a potter, a nai, a chamar, and a dhobi. If you remember anybody else, you can add them. Huh? They have to. They have a role. They have a role. For example, at the Nam Samskaran, you'll have to see to it that some kind of gold is being offered or gold is being administered, and then the sonar has a role to play. The carpenter has to come in order to prepare whatever the basic furniture for that to let the girl sit on, the kind of things. And for all those rituals, new pots have to be made, and hence they have some signature jobs for themselves. Even if a specified job is not allotted for that particular ceremony, your physical presence is required. You can recall the typical village scene there. Everybody becomes a party to the festival. See, it's something like, if I am giving a refined definition there, Jajmani system is an interfamilial, intercaste and intergenerational relationship which is more or less permanent. Intergenerational, intercaste, interfamilial relation which is more or less permanent. There are certain words that Majumdar and others use to describe this system. There are two terms. Common is the term that he uses for the serving community. Jajman is the one who receives the services. Across the generations, these Jajman and Kamin families are linked to one another. Throughout, Kamin is serving the Jajman. So if more than one children are there in the Jajman's family and Kamin's family, they divide the services between the offspring, etc. But it is more or less permanent, unless something very significant happens and that kind of a system is compromised. So it's like you take services from the same Dhobi family, same Nai family. Though the services are not so very great, you cannot change. There's no choice. You can only request them to do a little better. This was the initial understanding. With this understanding, if you go forth, the initial description is that, like, the landowning communities need these services. They pay all those serving communities mostly in kind. Whenever there is a harvest, a part of it is paid to them. There are particular numbers also how much is paid to whom. So it is like a paternalistic kind of a system where landlord comes to the rescue of the rest of the caste groups and families in times of necessity. This is also seen from a negative side when people describe this on lines with the landlordship. This is not similar to that. This is a different one, where there is an arrangement of service provider and service getter. This is actually seen from a negative tendency where, exploitative element is seen. Exploitative element is described. Generally, landlord is seen as an exploiter. He may be giving some bit of loan when the Nai's son is to study or something like that. there is an emergency, he gives a loan, and there's so much of an interest that goes into generations of service. Or some small time farmer could be there, landlord has given a loan and then his land is confiscated. Till eternity they would be serving the landlord. Bonded labor rent. Until and unless one hero comes and he disturbs, he questions the whole thing. But that is a filmy thing. You can't have a Chiranjeevi for every Rao Gopal Rao. This is only one side of the picture. Jajmani relations are actually now seen as more or less permanent inter-caste, inter-familial relations. In the traditional setup, it is found that, maybe I'll finish with the traditional setup, there are different views here. I'm only considering land-owning community and the rest of them. Who is exploiting whom is a question. People like Harold Gould, what they say is, just because a landlord seems to be a well-to-do fellow, he seems to be exploiting, but not every time. There can be occasions where there's an upward exploitation. The landlord is also exploited. Though your services are not good, he'll have to take from you alone. And secondly, the Kamins have an option to serve more than one jajmans. They have several landed people in this same village and they may be serving people from the neighboring villages also. So for the Kamins there is an assurance that if not this house, there is another house. Why do we talk about villages? We can see that in the urban areas also. There is so much of camaraderie there. If one pressing fellow, the ironing fellow, you did not like him, you cannot give your clothes elsewhere. Because there is so much of community feeling there. It's as simple as zones are reserved for the beggars. This is my begging zone, that is your begging zone. You cannot enter my zone. There are regional restrictions there. Actually, service seeker is always at the mercy of the service provider, whether it is a landlord or in the contemporary society. So for people like Harold Gould, it is the Kamins who exploit more than the landlords. Landlord can't even make a noise that he is being exploited. Otherwise his authority will be questioned. This is a traditional understanding. And it is generally said that with the changes such as industrialization, communication, etc., options are created for people in the rural setup. See, when opportunities are opened for both landlord and the Kamins. Now you are not at the mercy of the landowner. Whatever he is giving in terms of kind, mostly he was giving in terms of kind, a little in the terms of cash. But if I am migrating elsewhere, we have seen how the demand is for all these communities. Landlord also gets a respite. The carpenter fellow who was making all those bulky, the lower Paleolithic kind of the furniture that he was getting, now he gets a respite from there, he can buy from the urban areas. So there is more of opportunities there. But then if you see in the secular setup, this need not simply be a landowning community, it can be anybody. For example, say certain other caste groups, for example, like Kshatriya caste group is there, or maybe a Potter community is there. They might be needing services of all these people. They need the services of a Brahmin, they need the service of a Chamar, etc., etc. So all those caste groups that were actually serving the landowning community may be of a necessity for any kind of XYZ caste group. The event may not be so very pompous. But say some kind of religious occasion is there, a Brahmin has to serve the other caste groups also. So it was later came to be understood as a system that need not necessarily between landowning and the other caste groups. It may be any caste groups, the exchange of services is happening between them. It's as simple as, irrespective of whether you are a landowning group or not, you may be having your own family Purohit. From several generations, he might be serving your family. This kind of a relationship you can see in the pilgrimage sites also. When you go to the pilgrimage sites, you generally go to that Purohit who was associated with your family from several generations. He may not be there, but his lineage might be existing. From them you are trying to take the services. I think you can relate to your pilgrimage visits. So you go with that particular address, or you communicate to him before you go there, that you are going to visit on so and so date. He should be available to get all the services done, whether it is Shraddha Karma or something else. This is a more or less permanent relationship that is existing. Actually speaking, when you go to sacred complex kind of topics discussed by L.P. Vidyarthi, there he says that there is so much of dependence of the service giver on the service getter. Just imagine for certain days when there was a problem of transportation because of several bunds, etc. Tirumala temple was hardly having any pilgrims, especially in that Telangana thing kind of. Balaji was looking for pilgrims. He actually had so much of overload every time. Any time you go, there is an overload. But there was a time when the pilgrims were hardly there. So L.P. Vidyarthi was mentioning that this is not simply an economic one, there is a psychological problem also. For some time Balaji was in depression. What would happen to me now? And maybe he hastened all the process of creation of the state. All of a sudden things happened. People were wondering what has happened. It was primarily because of the psychological depression of Lord Balaji that all the forces of the supernatural came together and saw to it. And just because he was there on the, with due respect, sir, I will ask them to cut this in the video. With due respects to our Chief Minister, just because he was there on the Diksha, it was not simply because of that the state had come. There are so many other things. And this, I think, was the most powerful source, powerful reason for the creation of. So basically, sir, you will have to understand that though the landlordship and the kind of traditional relationships that we are speaking of, those were the exterior aspects. But even today, Jajmani relations are existing as more or less permanent intercaste. This is what is the coherence that comes up. This is what we talk about caste dependence. The organic nature of caste is very much evident in the Jajmani system. We will be writing about this, talking more about this in your next class. I would leave you there. You can watch Multiple Husbands today back home. You will have to write that thing. (37) You were writing and talking about westernization. Related to this, as far as the sources are concerned, one will be the note that you have taken. Second will be the mail that I have sent to you, or the topic that I have put there. The topic's heading is Westernization, Sanskritization and Modernization. You can go through that. so that you can write a note on modernization. Second thing we started to talk about is Jajmani system. So whenever a test is going to be held on these topics, one question will be there which you can prepare in the meantime. The interplay of westernization and Sanskritization. The interplay of westernization and Sanskritization as mechanisms of social change. As mechanisms of social change. So have a good time.